The alien princess stood before all yet pointed at me alone. Jake Miller never imagined his life would change in a single moment, but fate had other plans for him. The day started like any other aboard the human exploration vessel Wanderer as it drifted through the outer colonies conducting routine surveys of newly discovered star systems. Jake was a simple maintenance technician. Nothing special, nothing extraordinary, just another face in the crew of 200 souls. The Wanderer had been traveling for 6 months when they received a distress signal from an unknown source captain. Helen Graves decided to investigate. Despite the protocol's warning against unscheduled stops, the signal led them to a massive vessel unlike anything humanity had ever seen. It was elegant and terrifying all at once, with surfaces that seemed to shimmer between solid matter and pure light. When the boarding party returned, they brought with them survivors from what appeared to be a royal convoy. The aliens were tall and graceful, with skin that glowed faintly in shades of blue and silver. Their eyes were large and luminous, filled with an intelligence that made Jake feel small and insignificant. The leader of the survivors was unmistakably royalty. Even in her distressed state, she carried herself with a dignity that commanded respect. Her name was impossible for human tongues to pronounce, but she offered an alternative that sounded like Zara. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, with flowing silver hair that moved as if underwater and eyes that held the depth of galaxies. Her clothing, though damaged in whatever catastrophe had befallen her ship, still shimmered with an inner light that spoke of technology far beyond human understanding. The crew gathered in the main assembly hall as Captain Graves formally welcomed the survivors. Jake stood near the back of the crowd, just another face in the sea of curious onlookers. He had no reason to believe he would be noticed, no reason to think that this moment would define the rest of his existence. Zara stepped forward to address the assembly, and Jake felt his breath catch in his throat as her gaze swept across the crowd. There was something hypnotic about the way she moved, something that made it impossible to look away when she began to speak. Her voice came not from her mouth, but directly into their minds, a telepathic projection that felt intimate and overwhelming. She thanked them for their rescue and explained that her convoy had been attacked by a rival faction seeking to prevent a crucial alliance. Her mission had been one of peace, but there were those who preferred war. She needed to reach the Confederation summit within the next planetary cycle, or the fragile peace between dozens of species would shatter. Captain Graves assured her that the Wanderer would do everything possible to help. But Zara shook her head slowly. She explained that her arrival at the summit required more than just transportation. According to the ancient laws of her people, she needed a champion, someone who would stand beside her and represent the bond between their species and humanity. This champion would be chosen not by politics or rank, but by something far more ancient and mysterious. Zara raised her hand, and the air around her seemed to shimmer with energy. Every person in that hall felt the weight of her power, the depth of her civilization's knowledge compared to the aliens in the room. Humans suddenly seemed very young and very small. She closed her eyes and let her consciousness expand, reaching out to touch the essence of every soul present. Jake felt it like a warm wave washing over him, a gentle probing that seemed to look past his body, past his thoughts, directly into whatever made him fundamentally himself. It was not uncomfortable, but it was deeply personal, and he found himself unable to move, unable even to blink as that presence examined him. Then her eyes opened and locked directly onto him across the crowded hall through dozens of people standing between them. Her gaze found him with absolute certainty. She raised her arm and pointed directly at Jake Miller with a single word that echoed in everyone's mind simultaneously. You. The hall erupted in confused, murmuring people turned to see who she had indicated, and Jake felt his stomach drop as hundreds of eyes found him standing there in his maintenance jumpsuit, grease still under his fingernails from repairing a coolant valve that morning. He wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Surely there was a mistake. Surely she meant someone else. But Zara began walking toward him, and the crowd parted before her like water before a ship's bow. Her eyes never left his, and in them he saw no doubt, no hesitation, only a certainty that terrified him more than anything he had ever experienced when she stood before him. She was so tall he had to tilt his head back to meet her gaze. Why me? He managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. Because you are the "On the pattern chose you," she replied, her mental voice gentle but firm. "Your soul resonates with the frequency required. You possess something that cannot be taught or learned. Only recognize." Jake looked to Captain Graves, desperately hoping for some intervention, some way out of this, but the captain looked as shocked as everyone else. This was beyond protocol. Beyond anything in their training, an alien princess had chosen a member of her crew, and refusing might cause an intergalactic incident. The next hours passed in a blur. Jake found himself being escorted to guest quarters far nicer than his usual cramped cabin, while advisors, both human and alien, tried to explain what would be required of him. As Zara's champion, he would need to accompany her to the summit, stand beside her during the proceedings, and be prepared to speak on behalf of humanity's character and intentions. It all seemed insane. Jake was not a diplomat or a soldier or anyone important. He fixed pipes and recycled air filters. He played cards with the other maintenance crew and dreamed of returning to Earth someday to buy a small house by the ocean. How was he supposed to represent all of humanity? That night, unable to sleep, he found himself wandering the corridors of the Wanderer. His mind racing with anxiety as he passed through one of the observation decks. He found Zara, standing alone before the massive viewport, staring out at the stars. She turned as he approached, and for the first time, he saw her without the formal composure she maintained in public. There was a weariness in her eyes, a vulnerability that made her seem less alien and more simply a person carrying a heavy burden. "You doubt yourself," she said softly. Not a question, but an observation of, "Course I do," Jake replied, standing beside her and looking out at the endless darkness. "I am nobody. Why would you choose me for something this important?" She was quiet for a moment before responding, "You think importance comes from titles and positions. But the pattern sees deeper. It sees the truth of who you are beneath the surface. I chose you because when I touched your essence, I felt something rare." "What compassion," she said simply. "True. Compassion. Not sympathy or pity, but a genuine capacity to see others as fully real as yourself. You do not look at my people and see aliens. You see people. You fix things not for glory, but because you understand that every small task matters to someone." The pattern recognized this, and so did Jack. Did not know what to say to that. He had never thought of himself as particularly compassionate. He just tried to be decent, to do his job well, to help when he could. Was that really so rare in my experience? "Yes," Zara said, responding to his unspoken thought. "Many people, especially those with power, learn to see others as abstractions, as numbers or resources or obstacles. But you have retained something precious, the ability to see each individual as mattering. This is what I need beside me at the summit." They stood together in silence. Jake felt something shift inside him. The fear did not disappear, but it was joined by something else. A determination not to let this strange, beautiful being down. If she believed he could do this, then maybe he should try to believe it too. The next days were intense. Jake underwent rapid training in diplomatic protocol and interspecies etiquette. He learned the basics of the major civilizations that would be present at the summit and the complex web of alliances and grudges that defined galactic politics. It was overwhelming, but Zara was patient with him, spending hours each day helping him understand not just the facts, but the deeper currents beneath them. He learned that her people, the Kailari, were one of the oldest spacefaring species in the known galaxy. They valued honor and tradition above all else, and their society was built on complex patterns of obligation and reciprocity. Zara herself was the youngest daughter of the Kailari Empress, which made her important but also somewhat expendable. Her mission to forge an alliance with the newer species had been given to her, partly as a testif. "I succeed," Zara explained one evening, as they reviewed materials together. "I will prove myself worthy of greater responsibility if I fail." She paused. "The consequences will extend far beyond my personal fate. Entire worlds may fall into war. No pressure," Jake said with a weak smile, trying to lighten the mood. Zara looked at him curiously. Then her expression softened in what he had learned to recognize as her version of a smile. Indeed, no pressure at all, as they spent more time together. Jake found himself increasingly comfortable in Zara's presence. She had a dry wit that caught him off guard, and despite her formal bearing, she seemed to genuinely enjoy his company. She asked him endless questions about Earth and human culture, fascinated by details he had always taken for granted. "You have seasons," she said one day, with something like wonder in your world, changes its face 4 times each cycle, and life adapts accordingly. How beautiful and how strange. Jake described autumn leaves changing color and winter snow falling silent. On empty fields, he told her about summer nights catching fireflies as a child, and spring mornings when everything smelled fresh and new. As he spoke, he saw her eyes grow distant with an emotion he could not name. "We do not have seasons," Zara said, quietly. "Our world is stable, controlled. Our sun never varies. Our sky never changes. I used to think this was superior, but now I wonder if we have lost something vital by eliminating uncertainty." The wanderer reached the summit location after 2 weeks of hard travel. The coordinates led them to a massive space station called the Convergence, built by a coalition of species, specifically to host diplomatic gatherings. It was enormous, easily 10 times the size of any human structure, with sections designed to accommodate beings of wildly different biologies. As their shuttle approached, Jake felt his anxiety return in full force. This was real. This was happening in a few hours. He would be standing beside an alien princess before representatives of dozens of civilizations, trying not to make a complete fool of himself and potentially dooming peace efforts in the process. Zara sensed his tension and placed a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was warm and surprisingly gentle. "You will not be alone," she said. "I will be beside you, and whatever happens, know that you have already given me something valuable." "What is that?" Jake asked. "Hope," she replied. "You remind me why this matters, why peace is worth fighting for you. See value in small things, in individual lives and connections. This is what we risk losing if war comes. This is what I will fight to preserve." The summit itself was overwhelming. Jake had never seen so many different forms of life in one place. Beings of crystal and light rubbed shoulders with creatures of chitin and fur. There were hive minds that spoke in chorus and solitary ancients that had witnessed the birth of stars. The babel of languages, both spoken and telepathic, created a constant background hum that made his head ache. Zara guided him through the chaos with practiced ease. She knew many of the delegates and introduced Jake with a pride that made him stand a little straighter each time she presented him as her champion, chosen by the pattern, and representative of humanity's potential. The reactions varied from curiosity to skepticism, but none dismissed him outright. The formal proceedings began in a massive amphitheater designed to accommodate thousands. Jake stood beside Zara on a raised platform along with other delegates and their companions as the opening ceremonies unfolded. He tried to focus but found his attention drifting to the sheer spectacle of it all. This was the galactic community. Humanity had dreamed of joining, and here he was, a maintenance technician standing at its heart. The first day was mostly procedural, establishing agendas and reviewing previous commitments. But tensions were evident. There were factions present who clearly opposed the expansion of the alliance, especially to include younger species like humanity. Several delegates made thinly veiled references to the chaos and violence that characterized human history. During a break, Zara pulled Jake aside. Her expression was troubled. "There is resistance," she said, "more than I anticipated. There are those who argue that humanity is too volatile, too dangerous to be trusted. They point to your wars, your environmental destruction, your capacity for cruelty." Jake felt a surge of defensive anger, but he forced it down. "Everything they are saying is true," he admitted quietly. "We have done terrible things, we still do. Terrible things. I cannot stand here and pretend otherwise." Zara studied him intently, then nodded. "That is exactly what you must. Admit the truth," she said. "Do not defend the indefensible, do not make excuses, acknowledge your species' flaws honestly, but also speak to its potential. Speak to the individuals you have known, the acts of kindness and courage you have witnessed. This is what they need to hear. Not propaganda, but authentic testimony." When the proceedings resumed, Zara requested the floor. She spoke eloquently about the need for the alliance to grow, about the dangers of stagnation, and the value of bringing in new perspectives. Then she gestured to Jake and invited him to address the assembly. Jake's mouth went dry as thousands of eyes or eye equivalents turned toward him. He had prepared remarks, memorized phrases about humanity's achievements and aspirations, But looking out at that vast audience, all of it felt hollow and meaningless. So he abandoned his script and spoke from the heart. He told them about his childhood growing up in a neighborhood where 3 different languages were spoken, where families from a dozen countries lived side by side. He spoke about his grandmother who had survived a war and spent the rest of her life working for peace, teaching children that violence only created more violence. He admitted humanity's failures openly. Yes, we have made terrible mistakes. He said we have caused immense suffering to each other and to our world. We are young and foolish and we have a long way to go. But we are trying, and not all of us are trying. But many are. And that number grows. Every day he told them about the crew of the Wanderer, about people from different nations and backgrounds, working together in the darkness of space, united by a common purpose of exploration and discovery. He spoke about small acts of kindness. He had witnessed strangers helping strangers, people sacrificing comfort or safety for others. We are not perfect, Jake concluded, and we do not ask you to pretend we are, but we are capable of growth, capable of change, and we want to learn from you. We want to be part of something larger than ourselves. Give us the chance to prove that we can be worthy partners. When he finished, there was silence in the amphitheater. Jake felt his face burning with embarrassment, certain he had said everything wrong. But then Zara placed her hand on his shoulder and he felt a wave of approval and pride flowing from her. "Well spoken, my champion," she said, for all to hear. "This is why I chose him. Not because he would hide the truth, but because he would embrace it." The debate continued for hours with various factions arguing their positions, but Jake noticed a shift in the tone. Several delegates who had been hostile earlier seemed more thoughtful, more willing to consider compromise during another break. An elderly delegate from a species called the Vryn approached Jake directly. "Your words were unexpected." The Vryn said, his voice like wind through hollow reeds. "Most advocates emphasize strengths and minimize weaknesses. But you did the opposite. Why?" "Because lying would not help," Jake replied. "If you accept humanity into this alliance, you deserve to know what you are getting. We are flawed but honest about it, or at least I am trying to be." The Vryn regarded him silently for a long moment, then made a gesture that Zara later explained was a sign of respect. "You have given me much to consider, young humanas." The summit progressed. Jake found himself drawn into conversations with delegates from across the galaxy. They asked him about Earth, about human culture, about his own life and experiences. He answered as honestly as he could, and found that vulnerability often opened doors that bravado would have closed. Zara watched these interactions with evident satisfaction. She explained that the role of champion was not just ceremonial. It was meant to provide a living example of a species' character by engaging with him. By seeing his genuine nature, the delegates could assess humanity's potential more accurately than any formal presentation could convey. But Jake also noticed something else developing. His relationship with Zara was deepening. Beyond the formal bonds of champion and princess, they spent long hours together between sessions, talking about everything and nothing. She shared stories of her childhood on the Kailari homeworld, of the pressures of royal life, and the loneliness of always being watched, always being judged. He told her about his dreams and fears, about the life he had imagined for himself before joining the Wanderer's crew, about his sense of never quite fitting in anywhere. She listened with an intensity that made him feel truly seen, in a way he rarely experienced. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of negotiations, they escaped to an observation area that jutted out from the station, offering a spectacular view of the nebula that surrounded them. The swirling clouds of gas and dust glowed in shades of purple and gold, lit by distant stars. "This is my favorite place on the station," Zara said. "I come here when I need to remember why any of this matters." Jake stood beside her, taking in the view. "It is beautiful," he said inadequately. She turned to look at him, and there was something in her expression that made his heart race. "Jake, I need to tell you something that is perhaps inappropriate given our circumstances." "What is it?" he asked. "Being near you." She began, then paused, seeming uncertain for the first time since he had met her. "You make me feel things I have never felt before in my culture. Such feelings between different species are not forbidden, but they are uncommon and complicated. Especially for one of my position." Jake's mind reeled, trying to process what she seemed to be saying. A For you saying I care for you, Zara interrupted in a way that goes beyond partnership or friendship. I find myself thinking of you, constantly wanting your opinion, your presence, your... She trailed off, looking vulnerable. I do not know if such feelings are possible for you toward one of my kind, but I had to speak honestly. Jake felt overwhelmed by a rush of emotions. He had been so focused on the summit, on not failing her, that he had not let himself examine his own growing attachment. But now that she had spoken, he recognized the truth. He cared for her too deeply and impossibly. I feel the same. He admitted, his voice rough. I did not think I could. I did not think you would. But yes, Zara, I care about you so much it terrifies me. They stood there, in the glow of the nebula, two beings from different worlds, different biologies, different everything, finding in each other something profound and unexpected. Zara reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, but he did not. And her hand touched his face, her skin warm and smooth and somehow right. We face many obstacles, she said softly. My family, the expectations of our peoples, the physical differences between us, all of it is complicated. Jake covered her hand with his own. Then we will figure it out together. Complicated does not mean impossible. The remaining days of the summit were intense. The alliance question came to a vote and the outcome was uncertain. Jake continued to engage with delegates, answering questions and sharing his perspective. But now he did so with an additional motivation. He wanted to prove that connection across species was not just possible, but valuable. The night before the final vote, Zara seemed anxious, pacing her quarters while Jake watched. She explained that early reports suggested the vote would be very close, possibly decided by a single delegation. What if we fail, she said. What if I have brought you into this and we accomplish nothing? What if war comes? Because I was not persuasive enough. Then it will not be your fault, Jake said firmly. You have done everything possible. You have been honest and brave and diplomatic. If they choose war, that is their choice, not your failures. She stopped pacing and looked at him. How did I survive before you? Before your perspective and your infuriating optimism. You managed, he said with a slight smile. You are the strongest person I have ever met, human or otherwise. She crossed to him and embraced him awkwardly, given their height difference, but sincere thank you, she whispered, for everything. The final session of the summit arrived and the amphitheater was packed to capacity. The vote would be conducted through a complex system that gave weight to each species based on various factors. But the essential question was simple. Should the alliance expand to include humanity and other young species as full members? The debate was fierce. Delegates, who had seemed friendly, revealed reservations, while some who had been hostile spoke unexpectedly in favor. Zara gave a final address that was passionate and eloquent, laying out her vision for an alliance that grew and evolved rather than stagnating in tradition. Then it was time for the vote. The process was conducted silently, each delegate entering their decision into a quantum network that would tabulate the results instantly. Jake held his breath as the final count approached. The atmosphere in the amphitheater was electric with tension. The result appeared on displays throughout the space. The alliance expansion had passed by the slimmest of margins, a difference of less than 2%. A roar of reaction swept through the amphitheater, some celebratory, some angry. The implications would take months or years to fully unfold. But the decision was made. Humanity would be welcomed into the galactic community. Zara turned to Jake with tears streaming down her face, an expression of emotion he had never seen from her. We did it, she said. We actually did it. Jake felt his own eyes burning. He pulled her into an embrace, not caring who saw or what they thought. Let them stare. Let them judge in this moment. Nothing else mattered. The journey back to the Wanderer was celebratory, but also bittersweet. The mission was complete. But now came the question of what happened next. Zara would need to return to her homeworld to report and begin the complex work of implementing the alliance expansion. Jake would presumably resume his duties as a maintenance technician, an absurd return to normalcy after everything, but Zara had other ideas. She approached Captain Graves with a proposal. She requested that Jake be granted leave to accompany her to the Kalari homeworld as a cultural liaison. The captain surprised Jake by immediately agreeing apparently his performance at the summit had not gone unnoticed, and Earth's government was eager to establish stronger ties with the Calariso. Jake found himself once again departing the familiar, heading into the unknown, this time toward a world he could barely imagine as their ship entered Calari space. He got his first glimpse of Zara's home, and it took his breath away. The planet was beautiful in a way Earth was not, more ordered and elegant, with cities that seemed to grow organically. From the landscape, massive structures of crystal and light that pulsed with energy. Landing was overwhelming, crowds gathered to witness the return of their princess and the human champion who had helped secure the alliance. Jake felt like an imposter, walking among beings so advanced, so graceful. But Zara stayed close to him, helping him navigate the overwhelming new environment. The Kaelari Empress received them formally, and Jake found himself being examined by eyes that were ancient and knowing. She questioned him directly about his intentions, about his relationship with her daughter, and about humanity's character. He answered as honestly as he had at the summit, holding nothing back. When the audience concluded, the Empress spoke privately with Zara while Jake waited nervously outside. When Zara emerged, she was smiling. The Empress approves. She said, "She sees what I see in you, and she grants permission for us to continue exploring this connection between us." Jake felt relief flood through him, but also awareness of the challenges ahead. "Your mother is impressive," he said also. Terrifying. Zara laughed to sound like music. "She is, but she is also fair. She understands that the future requires bridges between peoples, and sometimes those bridges are built by individuals willing to cross divides." The following months were a period of adjustment for Jake, learning to live on the Kaelari homeworld, to navigate its social structures, and to be in a relationship that defied normal categories. He and Zara faced skepticism from both their people's questions about whether their connection was genuine or political. But they persevered, learning each other's languages literally and figuratively, finding ways to bridge not just the space between their species but the space between two individuals trying to build something real. Jake discovered that love, whether between humans or across species, required the same things: patience, communication, and a willingness to see the other person as they truly were. News from Earth was encouraging. Humanity's integration into the Alliance was proceeding with remarkable speed. There were challenges, of course, misunderstandings and cultural clashes, but also unexpected harmonies. Humans brought creativity and adaptability. While learning advanced technologies and philosophies from older species, Jake maintained contact with the Wanderer, and was delighted to learn that the crew had become minor celebrities. His friends from the maintenance division sent messages ribbing him about his transformation from grease monkey to galactic diplomat. He sent back assurances that he was still the same person, just in a very different context. Eventually, he and Zara were invited to Earth to participate in the formal ceremonies, marking humanity's full acceptance into the Alliance. Standing in the Great Assembly Hall in Geneva, Jake looked out at the crowd of humans and aliens gathered together, and marveled at how far everything had come. Zara stood beside him as always, her hand in his, and when it was time to speak, he kept his remarks brief. "I'm just one person," he said, "and this is so much bigger than any individual. But I have learned that sometimes the biggest changes start with small connections with individuals, choosing to see past differences to find common ground. We are all part of something vast now, and that is both humbling and exciting." After the ceremony, as they walked through the streets of Geneva, with crowds cheering around them, Zara leaned close to him. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "That day when I pointed at you and changed your life forever." Jake thought about it, about the fear and uncertainty, about how much easier his life would have been if she had chosen someone else. But then he looked at her, at this brilliant, complicated being who had chosen him. Not for what he was, but for who he was. Not for a second he said, "Every day is complicated and challenging and sometimes overwhelming, but I would not trade any of it. I would not trade." She smiled, that luminous smile that still made his heart race. "Then let us continue forward together, whatever comes next." They walked on through the celebrating crowd. Two beings from different worlds who had found in each other something that transcended all boundaries, and as Jake looked up at the sky now shared by Earth and 100 other worlds, he felt a profound sense of possibility. The universe was vast and full of wonders. Some of those wonders were technological or scientific, But the greatest wonder of all was simpler than that connection. Understanding the recognition that despite all differences, there was something fundamental that united conscious beings across the star. She was just Jake Miller, a maintenance technician, who had learned to fix more than pipes and circuits. But if his story proved anything, it was that anyone could make a difference. That greatness was not about titles or abilities, but about showing up honestly and trying to do right by others, and sometimes, if you were very lucky, the universe rewarded that honesty with something extraordinary. With purpose, with adventure, and with love that crossed the boundaries of worlds years would pass. The Alliance would face new challenges, and Jake and Zara would continue navigating their unique relationship, building a life together that honored both their backgrounds. They would have difficulties, certainly. There would be moments of doubt and frustration. But there would also be joy and discovery, and the deep satisfaction of building something meaningful together. But all of that was still ahead on this night. They were simply two people who had found each other against impossible odds, walking through a world celebrating peace and connection, surrounded by the evidence that bridges could be built, barriers could be crossed, and that sometimes the smallest choices led to the greatest changes. Jake thought back to that moment in the Wanderers' Assembly Hall when Zara had pointed directly at him. When his entire life had pivoted on that single gesture, he had been terrified, then certain it was a mistake. But now he understood it had not been a mistake, or random chance. The pattern, as Zara called it, had recognized something in him, something he had not even seen in himself, and that perhaps was the real lesson that everyone carried within them. The potential for significance, that circumstances and choices, not birth or status, determined what kind of impact a person would have on the world, or in this case on multiple worlds. The alien princess had stood before all, yet pointed at him alone, and in doing so had given him the greatest gift possible. The chance to become more than he had imagined, not by changing who he was, but by discovering who he had always been capable of being. It was a gift he would spend the rest of his life honoring. And as he walked hand in hand with Zara through the streets of Earth, surrounded by the promise of a new era, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Two souls from different stars, bound by something that needed no translation: understanding.